reading this morning comes from the book of Isaiah, chapter 65, verses 17 through 22. This is God speaking through Isaiah. For I am about to create a new heaven and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy, and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cries of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, and one who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards, and they shall eat the fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be, and my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. God add his blessing to the reading of this word from Isaiah. I love this picture that Isaiah paints, that God paints, of this new city that will be created. This place of peace, this place of joy, unlike any city that has existed before. Isaiah is writing these words in the last couple of chapters of his book in the Old Testament and describing this city of peace and of joy, a place where God lives with his people. In the city, and where the people act in such a way that is pleasing to God. It sounds like an imaginary place, like a whole new kind of place that he's proposing here. But it's not imaginary, it's not El Dorado or Atlantis or Shangri-La. No, the city being described here is a real place. It is not a brand new city, it's an old city. This is the city of Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem, so that the people could recognize it and say, this is Jerusalem, but not the same old Jerusalem. The places where there is hatred, the place where there is fighting, where there is weeping, where people work and work and work and see nothing from it, where people die far too early. No, this is not that place. It is a new Jerusalem. A recreated Jerusalem. Yes, it's that same city that David founded so long ago, that his son built the temple in, where Jesus came in through the city gates on Palm Sunday. That in the city and outside of the city, yes, that's the place where Jesus had his passion, where he suffered and died, and where he was resurrected, and where the very first church was founded and started and existed together, this first wonderful church. Yes, it is that old city. But it is that old city made new. It is the new Jerusalem. And that's good news for us today, because we know Jerusalem well. We still hear of it in our news today, and we know that it remains a place today of hatred, of strife, and of murders, and terrorism, and all of those things. It's good news for us to hear this idea of a new Jerusalem. A Jerusalem that people here aren't afraid to visit. A place of peace and a place of justice. And a place of joy. I like how in the scripture God says this will be a city where the people are a source of joy. I respond to that. The place, the community where the people are the source of joy. That's the way community should be. That's what we reach for here at the church, and we succeed to find from time to time with God's help, where we are a joy to each other. We support one another. What a wonderful city God is describing here. It is a wonderful dream, and it offers us hope. Hope for Jerusalem, the city. Hope for our city here today. Any of us who read the paper or watch the news, we know terrible things happen here in our community. Old people are robbed. Children are mistreated. The list goes on and on. It can get to where we don't even want to pick up the paper. But to hear this description is a description of hope. Not only for Jerusalem, but for our community as well. What appeal this image has of this new city that is built, and we can imagine it. What it would be like to live here in this community, where God is here with us, where the people are a joy, where there is justice, where there is righteousness. We begin to picture what that city, what that community would be like, and it gives us hope, and it kind of gets us up and going. Picture that community. What can we do now to get to that place? What steps can we take? This idea of a new Jerusalem, of a new Shreveport, of a new Dallas or Houston or Atlanta or whatever the city may be, man, that is the dream that is going to get us going and get us working toward that. Not only in big ways, getting organized, but each day as we live our lives and as we're part of a community, we make sure that we come in and we act in such a way that we are bringing joy and light and God's Spirit and God's love to this community and to this world. A transformed city. It's a big goal to have. But it is one that is a hopeful goal. And it can get us up and it can get us going. It's a wonderful thing to think about for us today. But just to think about what we're thinking about today, about our city and our community, I'm trying to fill our heads with that image. Imagine the first people who heard this good word from God. Because Jerusalem, when God was speaking this word, was absolutely destroyed. We heard this when the hurricane or the tornado comes through and we hear on the news that people say, I don't recognize it. I look around, I don't recognize my neighborhood. I don't recognize my town anymore. It has been utterly destroyed. That's what the people of Jerusalem were facing. Their town had been utterly destroyed, and the two most important parts of any city at that time were gone. The temple, where the people came together, and the walls around the city that protected them. Without walls, without a temple, it really wasn't a city at all. You had to have walls to keep the robbers from coming in and taking everything you're building and growing. You had to have a temple so that you could have a place to gather as a community, a place to worship God. And here comes God saying to these devastated people, there's a new Jerusalem. That is what we are going to be rebuilding. That is what I'm going to help you rebuild. I love this. I love that God didn't come up to them and say, man, everything is going to be just like it was. Because I think that's what we want. That's the easiest answer. We want everything simply to just make it the way that it was. And that never happens. Things are never just the way they used to be. And here is God saying, no, things are going to be similar. You're going to recognize this city. We're not going to tear it down and build a whole new place. You're going to recognize the place we are building. But this place is going to be a blessing. It's going to be different. But it's still going to be good. Different, but still good, still a blessing. And in some ways, what we're going to do is we're going to strive to make some things even better. Even better than they used to be. Well, friends, all of us face times in our lives where the city within us is destroyed. Or at least portions of the temple, portions of the wall are torn down. And oh, what a temptation it is. Oh, just want everything back the way it was. Everything back the way it used to be. Well, God's promise to us is not to make everything just as it was. It's to make a familiar place, but a place that is blessed. In some ways, even better. Even in its difference, it is better. It's a great promise of hope for any of us who've had a moment in our lives where we have felt this inner destruction, an inner city of our lives torn down and destroyed. Because that's what we need. You know, when we face this in our lives, we need a moment. And this kind of destruction where everything is torn down, you don't even know where to start. You don't know where to begin. Which stone to pick up first? Which piece of trash to remove first? And here's God's reminding us that even in these first difficult tasks of just cleaning up the refuse, that each step, each brick picked up and placed over here, each piece of trash thrown away, each thing organized through the disaster is a step closer to this promised city, this new Jerusalem that can be a place of great blessing. It's not always easy to reach for this new, this changed way of living. But it is what God is offering to each of us. A few years ago, one of the terrible tornadoes that rolled through Oklahoma City, just south of Oklahoma City, and one of the disciples' churches there was destroyed. And it was one of those disasters where, the whole town was gone. And in the months following the destruction, something else very sad happened in the church because a debate arose within the church and differences appeared between those who wanted to rebuild the church exactly as it was and those who wanted to build a church that reminded them of the old church but had a lot of changes that would help them to do the ministry now that they felt called to do at that time. And it was very sad because it ended up with a rift in the church and unable to decide how to rebuild that church. But that would hang on to the past or that would reach out toward the future or whether to have a compromise between the two. When the times in our lives when we feel like a part of us is gone, a part of us is missing, God speaks to us here in these verses, in those moments. And God tells us that it is possible to recapture, to have some of what we have lost, but it will never be just the same. But some things can be better, especially if we draw closer to God. If we use this as an opportunity to draw closer to God, to make our lives, to make our cities more the way God would have them be. I love the part of the scripture that says, "No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in the city, or the cry of distress. No more will there be an infant that lives only a few days, or an old person that does not live out a lifetime." You see, it is the same Jerusalem, but it has been created again by God. And I love that it's not this brand new place. It is the same place, but recreated with God at the center. And that's what we're given the opportunity to do every time we face some challenge in life, every time something in our lives is pulled down, we have the chance to rebuild it, but then rebuild it in a way that brings us closer to God. Helps us to live our lives more the way God would have us live them. That is just what we need as we face these most difficult times in our lives. These beautiful verses about this wonderful city, this great promise given to us, that we can absolutely rebuild. No doubt about that. And we can, if we choose, rebuild in such a way that brings pleasure to God. That we can glorify God in what we do and how we rebuild. in some very real way. Right now, we may be sitting on some destructive city in our lives. And we may, right at this moment, be struggling to figure out how this city is going to be rebuilt. How are we going to do it? Oh, so much to do. Or we may be halfway through the process, and we may be getting discouraged that we're 6 months in and we're not farther along than we are. Well, these verses come to remind us that yes, we can. We will rebuild. And we can, if we so choose, rebuild in a way that is pleasing to God. Perhaps right now you feel it, and you're in the midst of your own broken city, but perhaps you are not. Remember, too, that these verses speak to every person of faith. Every Christian, because that is what we are called to do throughout our lives, is to be rebuilding our lives. You know, we have invited Christ into our lives, into our hearts. And one reason we do that is because of our brokenness. The city that we live in is broken. The city that we are is broken. So throughout our lives, we are on a rebuilding campaign, trying to make things better, trying to clean up those neighborhoods that are downtrodden, trying to shine things up and make them better in each corner of our lives. Here is God reminding us that that is possible. Don't give up. Continue on that project, for every day you draw closer to God. Every day you get nearer to making this city in your heart more like this new Jerusalem. To where you're not just a blessing for yourself, you're a blessing for those around you. Your friends, for your family, for your co-workers. Your city shines out. It's like Jesus said. You are the light of the world. You are like a city on the hill whose light cannot be hidden. What kind of a city do you want to show the world? With God's help, we can make the city within us bright and clean and new. If something has been torn down, we can build it up again bigger and better than it was before, so that it glorifies God. With God in our lives, and praise be to God for this. With God in our lives, our cities can be ones of peace and justice and love and righteousness. Thanks be to God for casting this vision before us, for reminding us of what we can be, even in our darkest moments. And thanks be to God for His strength, His inspiration, His guidance, which makes it possible for us to build these cities within us, to rebuild them, and to make them into places of love and righteousness and justice. Let us bow. Loving God, we do ask for your inspiration, for your strength, for your guidance. Lord, help us to see the parts of our lives that are tumbled down. And as we rebuild them, Lord, help us to be inspired by you, so that they are built up with beauty and with grace, that they become a blessing, not only to you, but to all of those around us. It is in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.